The title of my message is called The Love Gauge, and today I'll be talking about love, our understanding of what love is versus what God says that it is and how He defines it. So it's called the love gauge, and so I'm sure we're all familiar with gauges. Gauges are instruments that measure something, whether it's gas, speed, or pressure. But one gauge in particular caught my attention while I was watching a movie. It was a movie about planes, and the pilot had a gauge to let him know if he was flying right. And so I kind of got interested in it, and I looked it up, and it's actually called the AI gauge, the attitude indicator, not altitude, but actually the attitude indicator. And it let the pilot know if he was flying flush with the horizon when it was dark outside and he had no reference. He couldn't see blue sky, green grass. If it was dark out, if it was stormy, he had to look at this gauge because, in those kind of conditions, sometimes a pilot can't tell up, down, left, right. So they have to always refer back to this gauge, the AI gauge, for a reference as to where they are. And they had to line up with it. So it began to translate in a spiritual way for me. I started to wonder, what if people had a love gauge? And instead of measuring gas, speed, or pressure, it measured whether or not we were lined up with how God defines love. And so the first thing I did was I went to God's definition of love that we all know in 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 7. And it says, "Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable, and it keeps no records of being wronged. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance." So that's what God says that love is. And our love gauges, that's where we need to line up with. And so I came up with 3 steps that I thought would be very helpful in making sure that we're lined up and flush with the horizon in our love gauges. And the first step is find out where your love gauge was set. I believe that our love gauges are set in our childhood, by our family, our parents, our circumstances, our environment. I believe we take a lot of little pieces of all these things, we add it all up, and that's what we equate as love. So unfortunately, in our childhood, there's things that happen that aren't so great, or they're very unpleasant, whether it's the absence of a parent, abuse, neglect, or a disconnected parent. Those things throw off our love gauge. And we get into a place where we just add up all this stuff, and we equate love as, maybe love is anger, or love is something we're not deserving of. Or love is getting what I want, or an ooey gooey feeling, So we get into relationships, and we're loving people through our definition of love, which is off, you know what I mean? And we get into a relationship, and a lot of times their gauge was set somewhere different. So we're loving through our definition, they're loving through their definition, and nobody's truly feeling loved because both definitions are off. So that's the first step. The second step is pursue God and His definition of love. And I believe that when we pursue God, we are pursuing love itself. Because God is love. So just that relationship alone, we get a better understanding of what love is. And then we take the Word. So we have the relationship, now we add the Word to it, and when we get in the Word, we're going to read things like 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 7. We're going to read stories about God's unfailing love for the children of Israel. We're going to read about His love when He sent His Son for us. We're going to read about Ruth and Naomi and the prodigal son and David and Jonathan. We're going to read these stories, and we're going to understand through His Word love better. So we have love, we have our relationship with Christ, with God, and we have His Word. Those two together really give us that horizon that we need to get into alignment with. So after we find out where our love gauge was set, and then we pursue God and His definition, now we know where we need to be. The third step is to begin to move no matter what. And I say no matter what because just like a pilot in a plane, when it's dark outside and they have no reference in their position, they always have to look back to this gauge. And in our lives, when things get hard or relationships get hard, we might not feel like being loving and kind and patient. But if we most of the times as Christians, we predetermine that we want to love like Christ. And if we want to love like Christ, we are going to, we are going to move no matter what. Where it's not about what we feel like doing. It's we line up. So if we begin to move no matter what, we get into alignment. I believe that our relationships get, they improve our relationships and gives us better intimacy in our relationships. And so that brings us to the third step. We already did the third step. Yeah. Okay. So my Bible example is Paul. I believe that Paul is somebody in the Bible who, if I had to guess, I guess his love gauge was probably off. And I'm guessing to Paul, that Saul at the time, that his love gauge probably read, love is law. He had the word, and he followed it to a T, probably knew it inside and out. But the thing is that he was lacking that relationship. So what happened is he's walking along, this is where I get excited, because he's walking along and encounters Christ, and he is instantly changed. He is instantly added love and grace to his relationship, to the word that he's followed. And so his gauge was probably like this, but now he's added, love and grace and relationship, and he leveled out so much so that he's the one that wrote 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 7. So that's the definition that we don't know. So I believe when we find out where our love gauge was set, we get our understanding through relationship and through God's word, we know where we need to be. And then we begin to move no matter what, the resistance, that we are going to experience better and more true and genuine relationships. Thank you.
Wow, that was good. Well, I want